Hey, ladies. Well,
Hello.
good afternoon or morning, wherever you are. Welcome to the Real Joy Project with Shelby, JennyLee, and myself, Nikki. So, today we're going to be talking about taboo topics that it seems from an early age that we've been told to not really talk about, at least for our age. I think even Shelby says yes, that's still the case. So, those taboo topics of, don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion, don't talk about money or finances, and even sex, things like that. So, we really wanted to pull the one out of there that has kind of been on our heart to talk about, and that's about finances and how it shows up in our lives and some of the questions or the hard learned lessons that we've had to find out about finances. So, I think Shelby has a great one to share about even student loans coming off of that component in your life. And maybe you want to share about some of those ups and downs and those aha moments that you had about that.
Sure, yes. I went off to college and had applied for student loans. Obviously, my parents were like, hey, you need to pay for college, and I had a few scholarships that were helping me out, but I still needed that financial aid as well. And so my parents, they're like, okay, we're filling these out. You now have student loans. And it's like, okay, great. Like college is being paid for. I could go into the bookstore and like pay for my books and have like credit on my account. And beyond books, I could buy like the cute sweatshirts from the school and the shirts and really anything that was in the bookstore and just had like this money sitting there and it was all fine and dandy. Fast forward, 4 years after college, and it's like, my dad's in my ear. Well, you need to start paying on these student loans now. And I'm like, okay. And so, I'm kind of scrambling. He's like, well, what's your username for this account? And what's the password and all this? And I'm like, I don't know. Like we created this 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago. And, so we're getting in touch with the bank and like figuring out all of the details of that. And I think even for my dad, that was kind of a learning curve for him as well. Hopefully he's okay that I share this. Like he did not apply for financial aid for college when he was in school. So he paid for everything out of pocket. So me being the first child out of the house and into college, I think it was a big learning curve, not only for him, but for me. I'm just like riding along, like, okay, yeah,
Right.
like I'm an adult now. I'm out of college. I'm making money on my own, and now I have to pay for student loans. So once we got that all set up, obviously I just had like a direct deposit going towards my student loans. It was like X amount of dollars were going towards student loans. Everything was great, right? The money's leaving my account and I'm doing awesome. I'm an adult and I'm paying down my student loan debt.
Right.
Um, Fast forward again, along comes my husband. He would have been my boyfriend at the time. And one of my goals that I had set up actually with my boss at the time was to pay down my student loans. Like I wanted to be debt free with my student loans. So between my husband Justin and my previous boss, we kind of started digging into it. And again, here was this another kind of like punch me in the face moment of another learning curve. Um, I learned things from both of them. Like I had 7 or 8 different types of student loans. Um, in my mind, I thought you had one big lumped student loan. Like I just saw the total amount and that I needed to get it to zero. Um, I kind of understood, there's interest with student loans and things like that. I thought I was doing a really great job just not being delinquent on them and paying them. But little did I know that, there were I think 7 or 8 of them that all had different amounts of interest tacked to them. So for easy math, right? I was like paying $400 a month to bring those student loans down. But I didn't know there was kind of a method that you could pay them down even faster. So one, obviously, I could have just paid more each month too, and that would have applied to the overall total. Um, but Justin helped me understand like you can apply and pick and choose which ones you put more money towards, as well as, you know, it's smarter to pay off the ones with more interest tacked to them. So mind blown when it came to
Mhm.
that. So anybody who's out there that is like, wait, what? Like I can do that. Hopefully that was a helpful tip for you. Um, there's probably some people that will be listening to this that are like, how did you not know that? Um,
Well, here's what I'm going to say to you, Shelby, but I think that that's what happens, I will say my parents, I was the oldest of four, and so it was really left to my own devices to figure it out on my own. So that too, I remember our school had people come and talk to us, our school counselor had a day where we did the FAFSA and things like that. And I remember helping each one of my siblings after that to get money for student loans. But I think the bigger thing is that sometimes we assume that parents are going to help, and sometimes parents can help and sometimes parents can't, for lots of different reasons. Maybe the parents, that's not their expertise, right? Or they don't know what to do. And so I think things are trying to be more helpful nowadays for students. That I think there's even a place on the FAFSA. The last time I filled it out, helped my kiddo fill it out, there was something that said like my parents are not willing or able to help out, or like even to fill it out, which that I don't remember being there before, like when I did it for myself or help my siblings or even for my other child. So I think that there's now becoming there's more people that are aware that it's not just always the parent, and you can't know what you don't know. But I think
yeah,
this brings us into another conversation about so many times we make these assumptions that people know, right? The same with me. Like for me, for student loans, my parents, they're like, I'm sorry, we can't help you with school. And I said, well, I certainly don't expect you to. I mean, it's me going to school. And same with both of my kids. We said, you're going to have to try to figure out how to, whether you take out student loans or you not go to school right away or whatever it is. And Judd, our youngest, he was determined to go to school, but he did not want to have any debt. And I was like, okay, well, here's the deal. There's got to be a method to your madness. And, for him, he spent a lot of time working on scholarships and things like that, but also, stockpiling his money because he did not want to. But it brings me back to, I think when I was in college, I remember at NDSU, there were these booths all over that had credit card that you could sign up for credit cards. And, it was like, we didn't think about, I mean, I'm like, oh yeah, I want the new Bison shirt that they're like giving out for free there. Heck yeah. And I think back, I think it was like maybe 4 or 5 or 6 years later that one of our friends that happens to be higher up in a bank, he started telling us about, oh my gosh, yeah, I went to go, get a loan for our house or whatever. And he even works at a bank. And he was like, oh crap, there were all of these old, credit cards, in his name that, I mean, we were all doing it, right? And now there's safeguards put in place for at colleges that they can't do that anymore. But
sure.
I remember Justin and I being the same way. Like we did it. I mean, I wasn't taking out hundreds or whatever, but people don't know that there's an amount attached to each of those. And then when you go to try to get a loan for maybe a car or a home or whatever it is, that money is kind of used against you. But I
Mhm.
think, Shelby and I talked about this another time, is that I remember thinking, I too remember being told, kind of getting the message that credit cards were bad. So it was like, I don't want to have any credit cards. I knew people that had got into credit card debt, and I didn't want to do that. But at the same time, I remember like there were times that you had to have a credit card, and there were times that we couldn't, ends did not meet. And I specifically think in graduate school, I ended up taking on more debt for graduate school, and credit cards were kind of that means to fill that gap. Um,
Mhm.
but then I remember, at the end of graduate school, I had $10,000 in credit card debt. And I remember my head just being blown like, oh my gosh, And it wasn't like we were going out for like, five-star restaurants or whatever. It might be diapers or whatever it was. But I remember thinking, how am I going to get that down? Because nobody wants to pay 22% on a credit card bill, right? That you're going to have to do over time. So I know for myself, I ended up getting a side hustle and things like that that helped me take that down. And I'm very grateful for that, because that's how I got rid of that credit card debt. But I think that now there's still a very easy way to get caught up in the credit card. It's just so easy um, to use it. But there's a couple ways of, or trains of thought out there that some people say never use your debit card because your debit card can be, it can be stolen so easily. It doesn't have the same protections as a credit card, right? So then there's the realm of people that say you should use your credit card for everything. I'm like, yeah, but for some of those people, if I would have used my credit card for everything when I was 22 years old or whatever, I'd probably still be in debt, because not having that understanding of what a credit card was and the budgeting, and that if you only pay this amount, you're still, then the $10 shirt that you got on sale at Target is now 15 or 22 because you have X amount percentage of interest, right? So I think I think that's really where this conversation, we're trying to have this because so many of those things out there aren't really talked about. We say don't talk about them, but then, okay, so we're told not to talk about sex, we're told not to talk about politics or religion or money. And then you get into a relationship or a marriage or whatever, and then it's like, oh crap, well, who's going to do the money, right? Some people have two checking accounts. Some people have one. Some people, you pay for this and I pay for this or whatever. But a lot of times people just don't talk about that because they've been those taboo topics until now. It's kind of like if you didn't talk about you wanted kids and now you get married and you realize one wants kids and one doesn't. It's now like, oh, now we have to go backwards. And I will say, even after 33 years of being together with my husband, we just realized that this last weekend. I'm like, oh my gosh, we never really did talk about that. Like, how did we maneuver that? And so I think you talking about the school loans is definitely one because there's so many different integral parts of that, right? That we could go off on different tangents and topics about just interest rates alone, right?
Yeah.
Um, for me, again, since I was going to school so long ago, my interest rate through the Bank of North Dakota was like 1 or 2%. And so when I started to learn more about interest rates, that was called good debt, or what I saw it as was good debt because it only had 1%. So I then was using that same method of like, okay, so let's try to pay down our house, right? Or
Yeah.
whatever, or a car, whatever has the higher percentage interest rate. But I didn't know that right away. It wasn't until I started to get into that, like, we can't be just doggy paddling.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
do
How
we
do you
get
get
out of
ahead?
this hole, right? Trying to
Yes.
be out of the hole, or you get yourself in the hole and now you got to learn real quick.
Yeah. I just want to make a comment on what you said there, Nikki, and then we can let Jenny kind of
Yeah.
speak into. Um, and maybe you both agree with me or you don't. I feel like as females, those topics are more taboo for us than men. Um, and I'm not saying specifically student loans because I have plenty of friends who are guys as well that didn't know about the interest rates and like how to pay student loans down more efficiently and this and that. But I feel like uh just finances or money as a whole, women are either told they're not supposed to talk about it, or somewhere down the line we feel uncomfortable and that we're not supposed to have these conversations. So
Mhm.
I'm really thankful to be able to kind of have this open conversation with both of you and share our experiences with other women who maybe feel like we're not supposed to talk about this stuff,
Mhm.
money specifically. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
So growing up, my mom handled the finances and did the bookwork. She did the bookwork for their little family business, and but she talked a lot about. She really taught us. I give her a lot of credit. She taught us a lot when we were growing up. Yeah, credit cards were bad. That was a big thing at that time for
Yes.
sure. And but they still you still have to be super careful with them because of the high interest rate. Like when I went to college, I had saved some money up when I used to babysit, like I was 12 years old babysitting. I had to put half my money away. If I made $8 that night, she made me put half away. Like, so I was building
Mhm.
this little savings account. And so I had some money to help me go to my first year. I went for 2 years. I have an associate's degree. And the second year, the other thing she taught me is to shop around. Like, I got a loan from a bank that was less interest rate at the time than the student loan was, and I had to pay it off while I was going to school. But that also meant I was already paying it off. I didn't have to wait till I was done. But even now, she taught me over the years to shop around. Like when you have a little extra money and you're going to go put it in a CD, don't just put it in your local bank that you like use because your grandpa used it and your mom used it. Like shop around because there's different interest rates, whether it's earning an interest rate or it's costing you, if you're
Yeah.
borrowing money. So for our family, I didn't really feel like we talked about money in the sense of like how to handle it, and she did a great job teaching us that stuff. However, it was still an awkward conversation as in like talking to your friends. Like
Yes.
and now I do notice that more at my age now, that people are starting to be a little bit more like open, as in the sense of, if you're going to a weekend away with your girlfriends or something, is I think people are at the age I'm at now are a little bit more accepting of. I can just say, you know what, I can't spend any extra money this weekend, but I want to come hang out with you guys. But I might not be shopping because my family needs to take care of this, and this. Where when you're younger, it's like, oh my God, I'm just not going to go on the weekend. I'm just not going to
Right.
go at all because I don't want my friends to think I don't have any money. Where now I can just be like, hey, you guys, my kids got prom and this and that and camp coming up, so I'm not spending. And people are much more accepting. Oh yeah, and then when you start to talk about it, they're going, oh, me too. Oh my God, thank God you said that because I was feeling like I was the only one. And so it gets easier to talk about when we're just open and honest about it. Like we've had a
Yeah.
lot of ups and downs in our lives, and yeah, it just because everybody's going through those ups and downs.
Well, I think it goes back to, we've talked about this numerous times. Um, I think the three of us and Jenny and I over the last 7 or 8 years is that when we talk about something, then it gives others permission to do the same. So when you
Mhm.
were just talking about that, I just remember like my parents and my grandparents, they would only talk about it when us kids were not around, right? But my grandparents and even my parents were on the edge of that era of like, seen and not heard for kids. And so I remember my husband and I started talking about it. I tried to talk about, hey, this is a bill that I want us to pay off, or hey, we got to like rein it in right now because we got this to pay for or whatever. But what I realized is that there was one night at supper, and I can't remember if it was before Gracie passed or after, but I remember Judd specifically asking his dad, he's like, so how long have you made more money than mom? And I mean, I was just like, what? I didn't say anything. He was asking his dad at supper. And his dad looked at him and busted out into laughter. And Judd's like, what's so funny? And his dad was like, I think I made more money than your mom the first year that I was working, and ever again. I mean, and so it was something that I really took a step back after that evening. And I thought to myself, man, sometimes when we don't have the conversation or when we leave something unsaid, our no response is still a response. So
Mhm.
not addressing to saying, hey, you know why mom is working so late? Or, I mean, I often said that to our kids, like, I'm working these long hours so that we can have our summers off together, right? But I never really talked to them about that I was this administrator and I needed to, I needed to be available for the job that I was in, at least my perception of that, that I needed to be working 24/7, right? And so it definitely gave me pause to think about it. And so then from then on, so I do believe it was before Gracie passed because I remember having that conversation with both of our kids and saying, okay, here's how much, this is about how much your dad and I make. I mean, there's a point of like too much information, but you also still want to give, enough information. So saying this is how much we make, this is how much our house costs, and this is about how much it costs for like our bills of like, you know, TV and different things like that. And I remember them just like, their eyeballs getting about this big, like, whoa, like, do we have any money left after that? And I specifically think about when Judd and Justin had come home the night when I had made that decision, I'd had that conversation with God that I wanted to switch jobs. And I had had that conversation with Justin first, but then Judd came home and I said, I just want to let you know, I haven't told my boss or anybody that, but over this next year, I'm going to look at, finding a different job. I'm going to be quitting. And he was like, oh, okay. So are you just gonna sell camis, Mom? That's when I was still doing Ruby Ribbon. I was like, yeah, I don't know yet. And then he goes, are we gonna be poor? Because his idea of like, I'm like, well, I'm not, this is a whole year in advance, right? This is giving, and this was the conversation that your dad and I already had. Like, okay, can we make that work, right? What if I don't find a job right away? Do we have enough money in the bank that can last us for X amount of time? I said, sometimes we make decisions and we don't have that forward thinking, or we don't think out the process of how that's going to go. And sometimes it works out okay, and sometimes it's not, it doesn't, right? But I think I think those two things with my kids, I wanted them to start to understand that life is hard, right? It's not that it can't be enjoyable, but money is something you have to talk about. And I think that, what I likened it to with Shelby and I were just having a few conversations or, talking about a few points beforehand. And one of the things I said is that if we don't teach them, then they learn it from the wrong places.
Yeah.
So, like, what I likened it to right now is like in the schools in North Dakota, there's a law that says that the students can't have cell phones, and I'm an administrator, so I'm definitely following that. But I said, but we have to teach them how to use them responsibly, and it's just the same with like the internet and things like that. It's the same with. We have to teach them that they're good and bad, and the same with money. Like, hey, if you get a credit card offer that offers it at like 28%, not probably a really good one unless but weighing out the pros and cons, like if you pay it off every month and it has really good benefits, then maybe that is the one for you, but that's the one that you don't you don't ever leave a balance on, right? Or something like that. But that's what I think about is, okay, how can we teach them, but also teach ourselves? And talking about it gives permission to others to talk about it, and especially so that it isn't a taboo topic for anybody, especially us women, younger women or older. I mean, I don't know how many times I've talked to, even an older woman saying, I don't know how much money we have, right? Or that I feel like I don't have any. You don't realize like how much money can make someone feel the sense of freedom, right? Or the shackles if they don't have money.
Right. Yeah. 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 And I think that's some of it is that when you don't have it, you could freeze up and you don't want to talk about it because you have to admit that. I mean, oh my gosh, what are we going to do?
Mhm.
And yeah, I think that's why sometimes it's hard to talk about, is just that it's something you all have to deal with. Everybody has to deal with, but at the same time, sometimes you just don't want to talk about it. You don't want to talk about your situation, maybe. It can also, the other thing that sometimes is you don't want to talk about it because maybe you don't want people to think bad of you, whether you make a lot or you make a little. I mean, on both sides of it.
Absolutely.
You don't want people judging you. And so I think that's hard too, but it's one of those things like, yeah, we all have to live with it. Like, That's
Well,
it's
I think we sometimes, I think Shelby said this when we were talking to, she said, you know, if we feel insecure or we feel like we failed if we didn't know that, like, oh my gosh, so I signed all those documents and I didn't know exactly what it said. How many times do we do that? When we all get a new cell phone or you get something on your Apple or whatever it is and it says push agree, how many of you read that agreement? Right? I'm just saying, but it comes back to that where we have some of those, it comes to self-doubt or we don't feel as firm in that. So then we start to feel like I'm less than someone else. And actually, I always think of like my grandparents, you know, they um you know, my grandfather was still wearing rustlers from Walmart for years and zip shoes. And my grandmother was phenomenal at money, but never went to college, self-taught, would go to the library, go to any conferences, any things that she could learn. I remember when she was telling me about mutual funds back in, I don't know, maybe the 90s, and I was like, right? But she was self-taught. And so I think it was one of those things that, okay, I don't know. So I'm going to go and I'm going to learn. And I think that's where now it's becoming more acceptable to have those conversations. Like, okay, so what are you using? Like, how do you have a budget? How did you set up your budget? Right? I mean, do you have a budget? You know, all those questions instead of feeling bad, you can't know what you don't know. If your parents or somebody else, like I remember in sixth grade, they taught us this. We had a real checkbook. Again, I'm showing my age, right? And we had a checkbook and we got paid for our duties in the classroom. And then once a month, we had an auction that we could buy things. But it still didn't get to the meat of it. It still didn't get to, okay, so you know, if any of you are on boards, this is how much revenue you bring in, and these are your expenditures, right? This one needs to be more than this one, or else you're not making it. I mean, those of us that are sole entrepreneurs, that we have our own businesses, all three of us on here have our own businesses. Um, you know, like I just got done talking about the girl or had the girlfriend getaway, and I was like, I haven't made money yet, but I haven't gone in the hole. You know? So, I mean, and they say that I think your first 4 to 5 years, if you can stay in the black, it's good, right? Or not going into the red, but it's pretty hard to do to not go into the red. But I think those are the things is that we things that we don't think about is we start to self-doubt or we make ourselves feel bad because we don't know. Well, if we've never been around somebody that talks about it or has shown us that, how will we know?
Well, and exactly. And I think, Shelby, I think your story is probably like more common than not. I worked in financial aid doing loans for 6 years, 20 years ago. That's what I did at one of the universities. And yeah, when you're 18 years old, you can care less where the money's coming from. Like, that's not your concern. And like Cancun, you know, like, let's go. And you don't even think about that. It's not your concern at the moment. And so then, like you said, you come out of school 4 years later, you're working and you're like, oh crap. But I can guarantee you, you are not alone. Like that is definitely more common than not. But, you know, and how would you know all those things unless somebody sat down with you and explained that you're getting one loan from here and the other loans from here, and this one has interest and this one does not. And kid, I mean, I know they didn't even know the difference between a grant, and some kids thought they were getting all of it was getting paid for. It was like, no, no,
Yeah.
no, you gotta pay this portion back. And
Yep.
so knowledge is power, but it's
Yeah.
also, you also have to like realize and not let that carry forward and keep you doubting going into your future,
Yes.
because you were 18 years old. You really are
Right.
just still a kid, even though you know you're through that. And that, I just want you to know that that's normal. Like that's
Yes. I would
normal.
agree. I would
Yeah.
totally agree.
I think to go further on this too is one thing I know with my husband and I is like having those uncomfortable
Mhm.
conversations, like communicating is huge, but also not being afraid to ask for help when you don't know something.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I going back to the student loan thing, it was really scary and intimidating to go to my boss or talk to my husband about it because it made me feel dumb that I
Mhm.
didn't know those things. especially when both of them were like very understanding of it and were, they never were judgmental or were like, well, how did you not know this and understand this? But I think just that feeling of like being intimidated by it because I really didn't know. Nikki
Yeah.
has said it a couple of times, like we're only as smart as the things that we do know.
Yeah.
So having those conversations opens the door to be like, oh wait, what? You're doing that? Like, but also being like, I think Nikki had said this too, asking, oh, well, how are you doing that? And if you don't know what something is, well, what is that? And, being open to learning and not feeling intimidated or scared, or I know I've said it earlier, but like I did really feel dumb approaching my husband with questions because I thought to him it was something that he so simply understood, that it was really hard for me to admit that I was like, well, okay, you really understand something that is so easy and I don't. Um, to go further on what Nikki said earlier too is, if you didn't have those conversations before and then all of a sudden you're in a relationship, that was an experience for me once, after a couple years of dating, like finances really were a kind of a pinch point and something that was really uncomfortable for my husband and I to work through together. And both of us understand, here's the overall goal that we want to get to together and like have those conversations. I think I shared with you ladies a couple weeks ago. My husband he's very frugal with his money. He's very smart with it. He's like the guy that loves designing Excel spreadsheets, like loves numbers, all of this stuff. And for me, it's kind of like, yeah, okay, like I was always told, save your money, put it in savings, and like you're doing really well. And he's taught me some really great things of like, no, we're gonna move X amount of money to invest here, and we're gonna pay more effectively on different things and so on and so forth. But there was one situation early on in our relationship that we had went into Walmart and we had bought some things, and some of the stuff had said, it was on sale or whatever, so we were getting a really good deal on it. If I remember right, it was like some sort of meat or something. And we got back out into the car and he was like checking the receipt, and he was like, well, they overcharged me on this. Like that was wrong of them to say it cost this much, and like we got overcharged. Um, he went back in and left me out in the vehicle because I was like, okay, this is like a couple of dollars. Like, I'm not going back in there and like causing a scene. Like, that can be you, whatever. So he went back in there. 45 minutes later, comes back out with his like $3 Walmart gift card, and kind of the smug look on his face, like I showed them. Um, that was a huge turning point for us because I was like, you wasted my time. Like $3 is not that much. Like the amount of money that you just spent leaving the vehicle running, like paying for gas, like all of this stuff. And I remember we got in like a huge blowout fight and we were like arguing further into money and finances and this and that. And after that, it was really kind of scary again and intimidating for me to go to him with things that were going to maybe cost more than they should have in his mind. Um,
Mhm.
so fast forward to us, we moved together, got married, all this, and obviously we've had like really uncomfortable conversations about money up to this point. But when we had moved, I was not working full time like I was before. I was and am now nearly 100% dependent on him financially. So bringing some of those experiences and situations forward, we've had to have some uncomfortable conversations, that I had to kind of work through some things being like, hey, I need this amount of money to be able to do these type of things. But I would have flashbacks of like that moment in
Right.
the pickup, of like the fear that
Yeah.
he's not gonna see the value. But just like that uncomfortable conversation with him around
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so true. Like you said, that situation. So now in the future, you're thinking it sparks that memory and that emotion that happened in the
Mhm.
past. I think I've mentioned this to Nikki before, and maybe even talked about it on the founders table that we're a part of, is something that you procrastinate on. And like, I will procrastinate paying our bills. And it's the stupidest thing. There's money in the bank now to pay them. But there was a time way back when where it was like, I'm going to pay this one right now, and this one's got to wait a little bit. And I'm going to call this one and see if they're okay if I just make a little payment. There were times that we went through that. And so I think that trigger, that emotional trigger of that anxiety and fear of like, okay, let's go to the bills, see if we got enough money to pay for them, still lingers years and years later, even though I have money in the
Yeah.
bank to pay my bills. But I still get that anxiety when I pull out that pile of bills and go to mail that, get them done. It still does that. But I realized that one day it was like a boom, it clicked with me like, okay, this is why you're feeling that way. And I'm working through that. Like, okay, you're fine. You can pay the bills, all's good. But it took me a long time to realize that that's why I was procrastinating,
Right.
out of
Right.
fear. Yeah, yeah, of that
Yeah.
anxiety of a past memory. Just like you, that past memory builds that trigger of like, I don't want to bring this money topic up today because
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
and Justin has like tried to drill it in my head. Like, it is our money,
right.
Shelby. And yes, he had that one moment where it was like, okay, the frugalness went a little too far, right?
Right.
But when we moved, we had to have that conversation of it's our money, Shelby. Like, you just need to ask me. And so it has gotten better over time. I think another emotion that kind of gets pulled into it was before we moved, I was financially independent of
Mhm.
him. So that transition of like going from 100% independent to now like 100% dependent on him, was
Yes.
kind of a jab at my pride a little bit
Yes.
too. So
Yeah.
kind of having to work through that. And I know both of you ladies remind me all the time the value that I'm bringing as a stay-at-home mom. And I do bring in somewhat of an income through my own business too, but just seeing that value that I bring to our daughter, and how much money I'm actually saving by being the one at home and not putting her in daycare. um,
Right.
but yeah, it's just like Jenny said, like, you think back on those things and you're like, why am I even doing this? Because it's not like that anymore. But
Right.
it kind of shocks you
Well,
every time.
I'm going to bring up, so for me, I have done our finances since we this next month we will be together 33 years, which that's crazy to think. But I've done our finances probably for the last 29 years. As soon as we got out of college or got out of high school, we were still together. And I think that next year, so maybe, I don't know, 28, 29 years, right? And or maybe 30, I don't even know. But what I was going to say about that is that I've always been the one that's paying the bills. I have those conversations with him. And like JennyLee was just saying, there were different times in our lives where we did not have extras. And it was several years ago that my husband said to me, he's like, could I like get could I get some money? Which Shelb had talked about previously with us. And I said, I didn't realize how demeaning that would I never intended that to be the feeling, right? But for him, it's that I was taking care of all of that. And I do know that he finds the value in that, right? He is appreciative. He's offered to take it. And of course, for me, a little controlling, I'm like, I don't think so. I mean, I would really like someone else to do it, but at the same time, I don't know that I could let go. Um, but he said he often would say, I don't even know how much money I make because the pay stub goes right to you. Like we could be, he's like, I know, I know we're not destitute, but at the same time, he's like, I don't know. If there's nothing big coming up or that I need to tell him about, life just keeps going on. And
Right.
and when he said that to me, it made me realize that I was making him feel inferior. Basically kind of, and I know that your husband that was not his intention either, Shelb, right? But it
Yep.
was that I was just going along doing what I needed to do. And I didn't think about he had a debit card. He could go get money, right? Or whatever. But instead of him thinking, we've had this conversation too, is that then he had to ask. He shouldn't have to ask. It is our money. It all goes in
Mhm.
for us, it goes all into one account. And I'm like, it has your name on it, you know. As we have gotten older and finances have changed, instead of saying like, can I do that? And I'd be like, oh yeah. And he's like, well, good, because I already did. That's how I'm asking. But what I did to try to counteract that when we were in that space, when he said, it just, I feel like I always have to ask. Then I made a point of it that even though I didn't necessarily, I made sure to go and get that money and and give it to him physically, so that he had the cash to spend, even though he had the debit card or whatever. I think that that was then it gave him a sense of freedom, like I talked about
Mhm.
earlier, that he didn't have to ask his wife or the mother figure or whoever, whatever, right? That it was his money, you know? And I mean, sure, I mean, I didn't get out thousands and thousands of dollars, but it's just even that small amount to have that spending money that's just like nobody's tracking it. Like for a while, I'd say, I'd be in here paying bills. I'm like, did you go to Walmart yesterday? He's like, dear God, are you like tracking me? And I would always just like, well, you never know, because at some time a lot of our cards were getting stolen at a certain time in history here in Watford City. And so he would just be like, dear God. And I'm like, no, I know I'm old school, but I still, do my checkbook down to the penny every month. That's just how I am. I'm not saying everybody else has to do me, but I realized that would I like that if I were in his place? And I would not want that either. I wouldn't want to have to feel like I had to ask for everything. There has to be that conversation. Can I get a new lawnmower? Not right now, or we could, but we'd have to, right, having that conversation of like, are we going to put it, do we make payments on it for next summer? Or what do we do? Or do we have the money to pay for a new washing machine or whatever? New vacuum, whatever it is. But I think the moral of all of our conversation today has been opening up those lines of communication and not letting it be a taboo topic anymore. And that we want I mean, I think all three of us on this show today is what we want. We want our kids to know more than we did, right? And to not have some of those, maybe they're going to have some of those feelings regardless, but to be in a better place than where we were. Yeah.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that on more than just the financial topic. I mean, Justin and I have talked about things like, we want our daughter to experience more cultural things than us because we grew up in like both of us grew up in really, really small towns. We want her to, understand how money works and stuff. So if she does need to do student loans, it's not the same thing that I went through. But just it's all sorts of things. Like I think we could even venture off on a completely different topic, like how you want your, I feel like, and I mean, you ladies are much further into motherhood than myself, but you would feel like you were a successful parent if your kids just do better than you in general.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I think that's always the goal. One other thing to realize, having two children is they grow up in the same house and they handle money completely differently. And that is comes down to personality and interest and just all those different things. Like I was telling you when I used to babysit, I had a little notebook and I did for years. I kept all my finances in this little notebook all written down. I loved it. It was like fun for me. My husband was the complete opposite, like, oh wait, what do you mean there's no money in there? Like And so each personality, because yeah, my two girls are in the same household and they just handle it differently. And I wanted to round back to Shelby when you were talking about like feeling dumb about money. I think that's the other thing is if you're some of us are interested in it, some aren't, some are interested in numbers, some are not. Like I'm now at a more secure place where I will fully admit, like, I don't understand mutual funds and blah blah blah. And I just tell those people, I'll go sit at the bank or sit with my retirement guy and be like, you tell me, this is what you get paid to do. Like,
Yeah.
you went to school for this. This is your specialty. This is not my specialty. This is why you have a job, you know?
Yeah.
And I've learned to let that go and just admit, I don't know. I don't understand this. And I really don't want to understand some of it. I just want you to take care of it for me.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think, yeah, I think nowadays there's much more acceptance to that.
Mhm.
And we, like Shelby said, the $3 versus the 45 minutes. I think that's the other thing is that trying to help people, especially us women, to understand what is more what's worthy of you. Is it the money in that time or is it the time? Right. So, and that could bring us into a whole nother conversation. But
Mhm.
I really want us to just, I think it was a really good conversation today. I think that there's so many other places that we could go. And so if you guys that are following us and watching us, if you have any ideas or topics that you would like us to, that kind of branch out from this in this topic of finances, we would love if you want us to dig deeper about, budgeting or different opportunities for those different people that have that expertise, please let us know that down in the comments because we're always looking for topics. I mean, we have a list a mile long, but also we know that we also want to make sure that we're talking about topics that people care about. And I think this is one that whether we want to or not, we usually have to care about because the world takes money to make it go round. So, but I want to thank you all. Thanks for us, thanks for everybody being here today and talking about this topic. And I'm sure we'll come back to it in many different forms, but I think it can at least start to open the conversation about what else can we talk about with money. All right.
Yeah. Thank you both for,
Absolutely.
All
yeah,
right.
thank you
Thanks,
both.
guys.
Wait. Thank you both for
Yes.
being honest and open today.
Yes.
But I want to do a little plug for us.
Oh,
Make
yes.
sure you guys subscribe to our YouTube channel because soon we will be able to actually go live in YouTube and it'll be a little bit more, just efficient for all of us and for you guys as viewers. So please subscribe and then click the bell in YouTube also, and that will give you notifications when we upload a new video. So that's my little plug for the day.
That's why JennyLee is the one to remember. She is so good at that. She helps us with all things like that. So thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.